Hello, how are you all doing? This is our last note session, which is exciting in and of itself. I was going to say you did it, but you almost did it. We just have the final left, this week's assignments, and you are done. And you did it despite COVID, so good for you. We are going to cover the last bit of World War II notes and get you rolling. Monday, we have a Zoom meeting and we're going to go over the study guide and then take our test, and you are done. And I will also go over in that meeting what to do with your textbook because I got some feedback from Mr. Jove on that too, so that's good. So let's get right to the notes so you can get your homework done and get on with your life. So today we're going to be talking about how the war machine affects the United States at home. We've also got to look at how the plan to stop Hitler was implemented in Europe. Then we're going to talk about fighting in the Pacific. Then we're going to talk about the atomic bomb. So those are like the big topics. And watching the clips that I put by your questions are really going to help you not only with those questions, but the study guide too. So again, taking that time to prep. And I know more than half of you watch these, and I really appreciate that. And you are going to have such a huge payback when you're taking this test, and honestly, it's going to be a breeze for you because you're going to know everything. So it's worth your while. So good for you. Let's get right to work. We're talking about the allies who are going to turn the tide and the war machine, and we're going to get you guys caught up. So I want to make sure that we are on the right track, and I think we left off at the home front, the price of victory. So this is where you should be on your notes. Here are mine. Let's talk. So the war is expensive. That should not come at any great surprise. World War I was expensive. The Civil War was expensive. The American Revolution was expensive. Every war we talked about this year was expensive. And I've always said that that's true no matter what time period you are in history. And there's always this debate of how are we going to pay for it. In the Middle Ages, lords were selling off land to communities in the form of charters, and you could purchase a charter and that would give them money to then buy the equipment necessary to go to the Holy Land. Later on, when we get into the American Revolution, Congress had told Washington to requisition for it. Not popular. Then as we move closer to the 20th century, it's bonds and taxes and essentially asking the people for money or taxing their income or their property. We see the same thing going along here. This conflict is twice the spending of all previous wars since 1776. So it is really, really expensive. And you can just imagine with the equipment that it was. Roosevelt, of course, wants a pay-as-you-go model, but that just can't be done. They do increase income tax. That was done Civil War, World War I. But still, only about 2/5 of the war costs were paid by the current revenues, and the rest is being borrowed. The war is costing about $10 million an hour for my kids who like statistics. So, yeah, this is an expensive war. Bonds were hugely pushed, and they were pushed in World War I as well. There's loads of propaganda pieces on buying Liberty bonds, which again, bonds essentially loan the government money. You buy this certificate hoping to cash it in at a later date for a little bit more money. You've essentially given the government money to play with for a while. So bonds were really pushed to the people, and of course rationing. And we're seeing a little bit of that even today. If you're like me, you've noticed on the news that they're talking about possibly rationing beef. I don't know if we'll see that here in mid-Missouri just because we're so big into producing pork and beef. But imagine if you had a ration card. And I saw in the paper they had Meatless Monday. And I thought of you guys because I was like, oh my gosh, that's World War I when they had Meatless Mondays. So, it's kind of interesting how things are coming around again, although in a different situation. So the Big Three strategy. The Big Three referred to, of course, Churchill, Roosevelt in the center and Stalin over here on the right. They meet together, and it is somewhat a reluctant meeting. We don't love Stalin. And I wish we were in class because I would love to show you guys the A&E biography of Stalin. If you're bored and you like history, you should watch it. It is it's a sobering video. I had no idea how deadly this guy was because he's so overshadowed by Hitler. So working with him, it was tough. I mean, we had to have known that he was up to no good, and he's purging his own people. You all wrote, I think it was in the last assignment, that he had this policy of reclaiming the land. That was probably under Lenin. Reclaiming land for the government and taking it from the kolkhas or the landowning farmers, and just went through purges of these people. Stalin is very paranoid. He's totalitarian, doesn't like competition, and just working with him was rough. His body count's quite high as well. They're still finding bodies in the northern part in Siberia, so working with him was rough. But it's like you have to team up with the enemy to conquer the greater enemy, and the greater enemy is Hitler. And we need to have Stalin applying pressure on Germany from the east. So we're going to have to bite the bullet and work with Stalin. So we meet with them, and we come into this war a little bit late, sort of typically, and we come in because Japan bombed us. And so we've got a lot of beef with Japan, but no one really else does. It's just kind of our deal. And we decide with these guys, all right, we're going to focus on Hitler. Then the United States can focus all their attention in Japan. Did the United States have a two-front war? Yes. We were sending troops to Europe. We were sending troops to the Pacific. The bulk of our energy until VE Day, which I think Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I think it's Friday. It's May 8th, pretty sure. Until VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, we were going to focus most of our energy on Hitler, to defeat Hitler. Then the United States would be free to focus on Japan. So that was the course as we were talking it over with these guys. And this is done at Tehran, that's the capital of Iran, which I always remember because if you look at the T, EH, and you take that out and you just put an I, it's Iran, Tehran. Okay, so that conference is in Iran, and they decide, all right, we're going to let Stalin keep the little land that was promised to him in that Nazi-Soviet pact, and he's going to help us defeat Hitler. So that was the plan. And that's why, if you look down here at the bottom of your notes, you see D-Day. Now you understand why we had to have D-Day, because we're going to come in from the west, Russia's going to come in from the east. And last week when we talked about Africa and Operation Torch, Allied forces are going to come up through Italy from the south. We are going to surround Germany. I'm going to show you in just a second on a map, and bomb the bejesus out of their most important cities. That's really the plan. Let's see what happens. Let's go D-Day. Ew. Hang on. I'm just going to take you back just so you can see where those were. And that's what I just described to you guys, the surrounding of Germany. And once you get these written down on this map, so you'll have to look up, especially my visual learners, here is the plan. D-Day is right here in France. We're going to move in, liberate France, make our way into Germany. Soviet troops are going to march in from the east. And Operation Torch, boom, down here in Morocco, across Algeria, Tanzania, and through Sicily and up Italy, and make our way into Germany. And we thought we were going to have to take out Mussolini, but you're going to see here in a minute in my notes that the people of Italy had actually already done that for us. So, yeah, that's one less thing. But the idea would be to surround Germany. Hitler's here in Berlin. and then bomb key German cities by day and night, which were Dresden, Hamburg. Hamburg is a port city. It's up here in the north by the North Sea, and Berlin. So the United States is going to bomb by day so we can see what we're bombing. The British will bomb at night because they don't care because of Operation Sea Lion, where Hitler already bombed them. Okay, so how do we get this plan in action? We have to have the D-Day assault. And this is probably the one that you guys are the most familiar with if you've seen the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan, which I usually show you in class. I didn't post it. If you want to do a YouTube search, it's really easy to find. It gives you an account of what that beach assault looked like. There were several different places to land. We had some of the most dangerous places. And if you watch the clips this week, you'll see why our operation was kind of tricky. So this was organized by Eisenhower and General Patton. Eisenhower, who also fought in World War I and will become a president in the 1950s. I like Ike, and we like our war heroes. This is a picture of Patton. The operation was Operation Overlord, and it's June 6th of 1944. So it's pretty late. 45 is the year that everybody surrenders, so it kind of gives you an idea of where we are. And let's get all these checks filled in. So why? Troops are going to storm the French beaches to take back Paris. It was embarrassing that Hitler had control of one of the large democratic countries and cities in Europe. So this becomes a way for us to surround Germany. You can see here the different divisions that played. A lot of times we get the most attention because, well, we focus on American history and we had some of the most dangerous beaches like Utah and Omaha. Some of the other countries that participated were the Canadians and the British. The idea would be that troops would storm in from the sea while Allied planes dropped paratroopers behind enemy lines to soften the target. Anytime you do an amphibious attack, it's really dangerous because, as you can see from this picture, you're completely vulnerable. And if you know anything about this battle, you know that the German troops were in bunkers with machine guns firing on our soldiers as they came off these boats. So we were in a huge disadvantage. Also, some problems came in. The weather just did not cooperate with this operation at all. It had been delayed up to the point where it just had to get done in order to coordinate with everyone else. And it also really hampered the paratroopers' ability to soften the target too. Once we're able to secure the beach, it's a real lightning advance across France and into Germany. There is a video I posted for your questions, and it's one of the later ones, one of the last battles that Germany fought, and it shows the desperation of Hitler and the German army, where older men and young boys are left to defend Berlin. You can also YouTube any pictures and see the horrific effects of the bombing. Germany suffered just immense damage due to the bombing by day and night. The United States had taken the approach that we wanted precision bombing, and there's some questions about this on the test. Precision bombing is like it sounds, where you have a target, you bomb that target, usually trying to avoid civilian casualties. Indiscriminate is indiscriminate. You just drop a bomb and, oh well. The British had crossed that line, probably because they had been bombed indiscriminately by Hitler in Operation Sea Lion. We had yet to feel that from Germany. So we were still kind of riding that moral high, if you will. We won't with Japan, clearly. So as of now, we bombed in the day. It was more dangerous because they could see us and blow us up out of the sky. But we still preferred bombing by day because we wanted to see targets. I do remember in my family's lore that my grandparents' house was spared, but their neighbors' houses were not. Just like when a plane flew over, the pilot was hitting his button in his aircraft and the bombs were just dropping. It hit the house in front of my dad's and behind it, but not his. So that's kind of an interesting story. This is a picture of famous building in Berlin. This is what it looked like after the war and what it looks like today. And there's loads of pictures like this online that you can check out. It really is humbling just to think what having a war, a modern war in your country does to your country. So the Soviets are moving in from the east, the Allies from the south and west, and to avoid defeat, Hitler's going to launch one last offensive attack, and it's called the Battle of the Bulge. And they call it that because the line of troops, in their effort to protect Germany, bulges out against the onslaught of the Allied troops. And it gets its nickname from that line. And you can see it right here. I have it highlighted because it does show up on your test. You know that this is largely low-level recall, kind of multiple choice, true, false, that kind of thing. When you see the Battle of the Bulge and you're dealing with World War II, you're dealing with one of the last battles that take place. It's sort of like in World War I, the Second Battle of the Marne. Even if you're not 100%, you can pretty much guess it's going to be this one. It's the last German stance against Allied troops coming in from the west. This next section here, we're going to talk about when the Russians arrive. I did tell you, though, that the Italian people took care of Mussolini before we got there, and that's true. He was getting out of Italy with his mistress. This is a picture of his mistress. Sorry, they're being hung. I'll get to that in a second. It's not a very lovely picture. But he was trying to get out of Rome, and he was in a safe house. And he realized like the troops were coming and he needed to get out. And so he's in a car with his mistress and some trusted officials. And he's shot, and so is she. Rumor has it that he was shot by his own people. I don't think by his command. You know, Hitler committed suicide. I don't believe Mussolini asked to be shot. I think he was assassinated. The people of Italy had had enough, and they were so angry with him that they drug his body through the streets of Rome and hung him up like this. And his mistress. He was married, but his wife, I think she was long gone. He had a daughter too, son-in-law, which he had killed due to paranoia. But they were done with this guy. He's got an interesting story too, which you could watch YouTube on. And they hung him up. And this was before the Allies even get there. The Allies get there and they're like, whoa, okay, I guess this guy's done. Another interesting side note is, too, Hitler commits suicide in his Berlin bunker. And there's great YouTubes on that as well. He had known that kind of the gig was up, and he had this planned out. And Hitler knew what happened to Mussolini. He was really paranoid that his body was going to get desecrated. So he is buried. He had his body destroyed. And that's where, of course, all the controversial stories pop up. Where's Hitler's body, and did he really get out alive? I don't know. It's a history mystery. I'm guessing he probably died. He is a totalitarian leader, and I'm sure his ego couldn't have kept him quiet for long. With all of these fronts going on, Germany will surrender on May 8th, 1945, and that's celebrated as VE Day, Victory in Europe. And if you go back, we had planned on taking out Hitler first and then focusing on the Pacific. So our next shift is going to be the battle in the Pacific. And what I have written here on your notes, you can read these. This is what happened when Russia comes into Berlin. It's really awful. It wasn't good. And the people of Berlin suffered greatly from their presence. And of course, you know, the wall later will be built through Germany, separating East and West. So if you are curious what happened, you can read about it in your template. So we're in Allies Take Advance in Asia. Let's talk. So we've got a plan, and the plan has kind of two dimensions, and there's two guys that are the forefront of this plan. Of course, General Douglas MacArthur, who's shown here with his famous corncob pipe and aviators and high-waisted pants, and Colonel Nimitz. Hang on, I got a picture of him right there. And they're going to look at fighting in the water and then fighting on the islands. So we know that Japan had the East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere in mind. That was their plan, to take over that region and kick out the European powers that had set up colonies there. One of those powers that had set up a colony was us and the Philippines. And when Japan was overtaking everything, they take over the Philippines and the troops that are there. MacArthur is there with his men, and his men make him leave before he's captured because they were afraid he would be tortured and killed, and I'm sure he would have been. So they funnel MacArthur out in the middle of the night, and MacArthur, of course, vows to return. So he's dead set focused on getting back to the Pacific and freeing the men he left behind in the Philippines. The men that are captured are taken on this horrific march to a prison camp in the northern part of the Philippines. You can see up here, and they were captured down here in the south. It's a 60-mile death march called the Bataan Death March, and there's some questions about it on your test. That's why it's highlighted, and in your assignment this week. Super interesting. If you read primaries on it, be prepared to be a little grossed out. The Japanese were pretty brutal to these troops. This information is kept secret from the American people until the government decides to release it right before we drop the A-bomb. And historians have argued it was to make us a little more okay with killing so many people when we drop that atomic weapon. There's a picture of that march. So we know that the Philippines fell quickly to Japan, and the United States is really fighting alone. They're not getting much help from China. They're not getting help from local people. So we're kind of left. This is like our problem. We're not getting a ton of help from Europeans. They're busy with Hitler. So we're on our own, and we decide, well, we're going to attack Japan with these two major dimensions. We're going to have Navy and Marine troops with Nimitz in the Central Pacific. And General MacArthur is going to try to get to Japan by setting stage in Australia. We have to get as close to Japan as we can. And if you look on this map, you'll be able to see it. This yellow line is their sphere, their co-prosperity sphere. They were able to take all of these islands pretty quickly. Pearl Harbor is over here. So the idea would be, if we can get in here, around the Coral Sea in Australia, we might be able to work our way to Japan. That scheme is going to become island hopping, which you've probably heard of. We're also going to bomb Japan, like we were bombing Germany. That's called Doolittle raids, named after the guy in charge of those. So we're going to be working pretty quickly on this. The first battle is the Battle of the Coral Sea, and that's in May of 1942. Japan wanted Australia, so we couldn't have it to stage our attacks, and it would also secure up a vital location for Japan to use to then apply pressure to us over the Pacific. Something to keep in mind is when you're fighting on the Pacific, you have a lot of water to worry about. So you have to think about where you're going to base off. If you're going to refill your ships, or you're going to refuel your planes, if you don't have a lot of aircraft carrier, you've got to have a place to go. So Australia becomes really important. I had mentioned Doolittle's raid. This is not on your note template. I threw this in here. It does show up, but I think it's later. Chronologically, it happens in April. Aircraft carriers are about 1,000 miles off the coast of Japan, and we're bombing Japan with the hope to wear down the citizens. Next month, the Battle of the Coral Sea. And the Coral Sea is right around Australia. You can see this on the map right here. And the idea would be that we would use Australia as a base to get close to Japan. You can always find Japan because it looks like a banana. And this light little line around here is their co-prosperity sphere. So they're not just going to let us like sail up to Japan and be like, haha, now do you surrender? They have all this fortified here. So we've got to kind of work our way there. And this is going to put us right there. Most of this is done with carrier-based aircraft. Most sides don't see each other. This is not real up-and-close personal fighting. It was important because, of course, it's our staging point and it's going to halt that Japanese expansion. In June, we have the Battle of Midway. Now, this was really significant because after the Coral Sea, Japan decides they're going to hit back really hard. Japan wanted Midway because they thought it would be a great place to stage future attacks against us. All of this fighting was done by planes. So there's no like land battle of Midway. It's all done in the air. We knew about their plan. And because of that warning through intelligence, we were able to stage a great defense. And we turned the tables. Historians have argued that this is one of the most important battles of the Pacific because it's a momentum shifter, if you will. And now we're going to be on the offensive. Two pictures. Nimitz heads to Japan in November of 1943. His victory at the Battle of Guadalcanal starts our island hopping campaign. And Guadalcanal is near Australia. So Coral Sea and Guadalcanal, both near Australia. They're designed to give us a place to stage our attacks so we don't have to fly all the way home. We can just fly to Australia, and that's a great base for us to then go north and attack Japan and apply pressure. Island hopping is like it sounds. We would hop from one island to the next, closer and closer to mainland Japan. Unfortunately, the Japanese like to spread rumors about our troops, saying that how horrible they were, that they kill women and children and eat people. And so many of the natives, not knowing who to believe, committed suicide. Island hopping was that campaign to capture less guarded islands, set up airfields, bomb Japan, and hop to Japan. That will be on the test. In the process of getting near Japan, we were going to reclaim the Philippines. To get the Philippines, we have to get the Marshall Islands. And to get the Marshall Islands, we have to get Tarawa. These are all islands that are in the Pacific. And if you can just visualize, they're south of the Philippines, north of Australia. Now, all of these island attacks were by land. This is what gives us kind of an idea of how difficult it was going to be to actually invade mainland Japan. The United States employs a tactic of weakening Japanese defenses with our bombing and then sending in Marines. It's kind of the natural idea of softening a target before you send in ground soldiers. So we employ that island hopping campaign until we drop the A-bomb. And it works. It's a slow process, but it does work. Nemence's crew captures the Marshall Islands late in 1944. Of course, we dropped the A-bomb the next year. What gave us another advantage was the use of the Navajo language for communication. We had talked about that in some earlier questions. The Navajo language was very difficult for anyone to translate because very few languages follow this type of code. So they were quite helpful in our ability to communicate with one another. As we move closer to 45, many of the atrocity stories were banned from the general public's knowledge. General Henry Harley Hap Arnold passed this idea of allowing the American people to know some of the atrocities of the war because we were going to employ aerial bombing of urban targets. And this is kind of like indiscriminate bombing, where you're just dropping a bomb in a general area. Oops, if there's some unintended casualties. And we're crossing a moral line that we weren't willing to do in Europe. So we have to kind of soften the American people to this idea. I think we had been holding this morality card through much of the war. We don't do this, but now we got to cash it in. So the stories of like the Bataan Death March are put out there to the people. Stories of the kamikazes are also put out there. More on that in just a second. The last two ground battles that we'll fight before we drop the A-bomb are Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Iwo Jima, you're probably familiar with. That's the famous battle where the American soldiers are pushing up the flag after they conquered that island. These two are really close to Japan. So anytime you see Iwo Jima and Okinawa, you know you're getting close to the end of the fighting in the Pacific. I'll show you on a map. There's Japan. There's Iwo Jima and Okinawa. These two really showed us the level that the Japanese were willing to go to protect their mainland. This definitely factored into our decision to drop the A-bomb. You've probably heard of the kamikaze pilots, the pilots who would purposefully crash their plane in order to destroy us more. And it's just a willingness, a dedication to the cause that was always so shocking to us. Of course, we're doing round-the-clock bombing of Japan. We are bombing the bejesus out of their capital city, Tokyo. And while this is going on, we are developing a new type of bomb, an atom bomb, which the world had never seen before. The project of splitting an atom, which was tested in New Mexico, was called the Manhattan Project, and the actual testing of it was Project Trinity. The scientist who developed this type of technology was J. Robert Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer was trying to create such a reaction from splitting an atom that created a bomb the likes this world had never seen. Now, this is not a hydrogen bomb, it's an atomic bomb. Also during this, Roosevelt, who had been the president since the war began, died, and Truman is the new president. So sometimes it's confusing because in this war, you have two presidents. You have Roosevelt through most of it, but at the end, when we talk about dropping the A-bomb, it's Truman who makes that decision because he's the new president. Truman had been given lots of scenarios. One, we could go ahead and invade mainland Japan. They were projections that the war could continue for another year or two, with the body count being close to 100,000 or more troops. Some even said maybe 1 million. Or we could drop the A-bomb. and end it. And there was a lot of pressure to end it because the fighting in Europe had stopped. People were ready for troops to come home. So we warned Japan. We said, look, if you don't surrender, and we asked for an unconditional surrender, we said, if you don't unconditionally surrender, we will drop a bomb on you of which you have never seen before. It would have like catastrophic proportions. I think that's the way we worded it. I mean, we didn't come out and say, hey, we have a new type of bomb that you've never seen before that's going to radiate you. We weren't that blunt. We were just like, hey, we're going to drop a massive bomb on you, and it's going to be something you've never seen before. And of course, Japan is like, whatever. No unconditional surrender here. So on August 6th, the plane, the Enola Gay, it's kind of a weird name, but it was named after the pilot's mother, Enola Gay Tibbets, drops the first A-bomb. And that bomb was nicknamed Little Boy. It flattened a 4-square-mile area, and 70,000 people died instantly. That was dropped on Hiroshima. When we asked for their surrender after that, they denied it, and we said we would drop another one. And we made good on that. A few days later, we dropped another A-bomb on Nagasaki, killing 40,000. That bomb was called Fat Man. We threatened to drop a third. We didn't have it, but they didn't call our bluff on that, and Emperor Hirohito was forced to surrender on the battleship Missouri outside of Tokyo. August 14th, 1945, so a few months after surrendering in Europe, is VJ Day, or Victory in Japan. So how do we shape the peace after the war? The horrors of the Holocaust were something that we had never seen before. And for the first time ever, we were going to hold trials for war crimes. And those trials were held in Nuremberg. And I asked you in your questions, what's so significant about Nuremberg? Well, if you recall back when Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, he denied the Jews' rights. And those laws were called the Nuremberg Laws. So it's kind of interesting that what goes around comes around, I guess. So back to the same city of Nuremberg. And these Nazis were put on were put on trial for war crimes. And I know we're not in class and you can't read this, but I am going to take the time to read it to you, even though I know this is getting long, because it's super creepy. This Nazi military commander says in his trial, "Why, of course the people don't want war. Why would some poor Slav on a farm want to risk his life in a war when the best that he can get out of it is to come back to his farm in one piece? Naturally, the common people don't want war, neither in Russia, nor in England, nor in America, nor for that matter in Germany. That's understood. But after all, it is the leaders of the country who determine the policy, and it is always a simple matter to drag the people along, whether it's a democracy or a fascist dictatorship or a parliament or a communist dictatorship. Voice or no voice, the people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. That is easy. All you have to do is tell them that they are being attacked and denounce the pacifists for a lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same way in any country." How do we rebuild Europe? Well, the Marshall Plan was the United States sending money to rebuild Europe. In San Francisco of 1945, we worked out the UN, the United Nations, an International Peace and Security Council, where each member nation gets one vote. A Security Council is made up of 5 permanent members: US, France, Great Britain, China, Russia, and 6 rotating members. That's true today, too. Any country can exercise an absolute veto. The UN replaced the League of Nations. Remember the League? The 14th point from Wilson's 14 points that we never joined because we couldn't, pass it in Congress. Well, the League of Nations is gone and the UN is there. And if you go to their website, you can actually look up all the members. It's kind of cool. And the main countries of the UN, these here, would have their sphere of influence. And those are these dominant countries that would influence rebuilding or weaker countries. And so we're thinking about how to carve up Europe so that Russia or the Soviet Union has its sphere of influence, and the Allies, United States, Great Britain, France, democracies have their sphere. And so we agreed to let the Soviets dominate Romania, Bulgaria, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. And if you're familiar with your Europe map, this is like Eastern Europe. At the Yalta Conference in February, we decided how Germany was going to be divided. At first, we said 4 parts. Later, we came up with 2, literally dividing Germany into an east and west side. We divided Berlin with a wall. That's what's in front of the Churchill Memorial. The graffitied side is the west side. The clean side is the east side, which was dominated by the Soviet Union. And there's a map right there. And you are done. And these are just some things to think about as we end this topic here. But you're finished with the notes, so hopefully this will help you out on the questions. And we're going to have a study guide on Monday, and I'll be taking any of your answers there too. So I hope you guys hang in there, and I will see you at our Zoom meeting on Monday. I will talk to you guys later.